Close family members who've gone before us are often the ones who shape the direction of our lives. We think of obvious ones like our mothers and our fathers, our brothers and our sisters, grandparents, spouses, children, and grandchildren. Yet how often do we forget that sometimes even more distant relatives, friends, neighbors, members of the community, even strangers, may have had some influence on us? Do we forget to sometimes acknowledge the impact they had on our lives, to thank them while they are still with us? We're not alone. This is something we as humans have often had a hard time doing. I recently read a piece from my colleague, Rabbi Jack Reamer, who was reminding me of two stories from our ancient past. The first story is one that appears in the Yom Kippur afternoon service. The second story is one that you probably never heard before because it appears in only one rare passage in the Talmud. Let me begin with the story that is found in the Yom Kippur service. In the mid-afternoon on that day, when many of us are tired and when some of us take a break, we come to the Avodah service. And in this service, we recall step by step the ritual that was carried out on the Day of Atonement in the time when the Holy Temple stood. We retell the story of how the Kohen Gadol entered the Holy of Holies and what he did there. The Avodah service tells of how the Kohen Gadol practiced his part the day before so they would make no mistakes. He would stay up the entire night before, rehearsing, preparing for that day. Then when the day came, the Kohen Gadol would put on white garments, which he wore only on Yom Kippur. As he walked to the temple, thousands of people assembled in the streets of Jerusalem to cheer him on and to wish him well and to see how splendid he looked in his pure white garments. When he arrived at the Holy Temple, he went into the Holy of Holies, which was a place so sacred and so special that no one else ever went in there except the Kohen Gadol. He only went in there on the holiest day of the year. The Kohen Gadol only stayed in the Holy of Holies for a very short time. And during this time, he spread incense over the Holy of Holies, which caused a pillar of smoke to rise up so that he would not see the room. He then carried out the last sacrifice of the day, step by step, down to the last detail, precisely as the law provides. After uttering a short prayer on behalf of the people of Israel, he then came out of the Holy of Holies. And when he came out, a great cheer arose from the crowd of thousands that were waiting for him. And as he walked back to his home, an enormous crowd of people also stood on the streets of Jerusalem to congratulate him for having entered in peace and for having departed in peace. I'm sure we've all watched the Oscars on television many times. We have seen the stars arrive smiling at the photographers and waving at their fans as they walk down the red carpet. As great as that is, I can tell you that there is no comparison at all between the behavior of the crowds at these two events. The reception that the Kohen Gadol received as he walked to and from the Holy Temple on Yom Kippur makes the entrance of the movie stars on the red carpet seem boring and unexciting. As the Talmud says, anyone who was alive in that generation during the temple times and who was privileged to be there and to see the pageantry of the Kohen Gadol walking to and from the temple never ever forgot it. And that is why we retell the story of the glory of the Kohen Gadol every year in the middle of the afternoon of Yom Kippur. We tell the story with the hope that it will be a substitute for the sacrifice. Our prayers will substitute for what our people did thousands of years ago, and it will bring us favor in the sight of God. It was truly a moment of pomp, glory, and grandeur, like none other moment, like no other moment in the entire Jewish calendar. Now let me tell you a second story that comes from the same time period, and I'm willing to wager that most you have never heard before. The passage deals with the question, if the Holy of Holies was so pure and so holy a place that no one was ever allowed to enter it except the Kohen Gadol, how did they keep it clean? How did they repair it from the damages that occur over time in every building? How did they paint it when it needed to be repainted? Did they allow this holiest of all places to fall into disrepair? Did they allow dust to accumulate there just because no one was ever allowed to enter it? This is the answer the sages give. The Talmud says that there was a trap door in the roof of the Holy Temple, which was located just above the Holy of Holies. Once every 7 years, they would lower some workmen down through this trap door by rope. So they would make whatever repairs and whatever cleaning had to be done there. When these workers had finished their labors, they would give a tug on the rope, and the people on the roof would pull them up again. When the day was done, these workmen would take their tools and go home. No one made a fuss over them as they walked home. No one even knows their names. The Talmud tells us one more detail about these workmen. It says that before they were let down into the Holy of Holies, before they could even begin their work, these workmen were given special face masks. The Talmud says that these masks had blinders on both sides, so they could only see forward. They could only face forward, and so they could not look around and see what was in this holiest of places. They could only face forward, and they could only see the work that they had to do. They could not desecrate the Holy of Holies by inspecting it as if it were some ordinary place, or as if they were tourists or onlookers. The Talmud says that the workmen wore blinders. As they looked about and saw the Holy of Holies, they would die. The workmen who entered the Holy of Holies once every 7 years in order to cleanse it and repair it wore face masks. They would not desecrate the holiest place in the temple by looking around and therefore die. Now let me ask you a question. When you hear these two accounts, do you notice the one great difference between how the Kohen Gadol was treated and how the workmen were treated? The Kohen Gadol went to the temple and returned from the temple surrounded by thousands and thousands of well-wishers. The people of Jerusalem filled the streets to cheer him on and to wish him well as he made his way to the temple and afterwards as he made his way back to his home. The workmen who painted and cleansed and repaired the Holy of Holies, no one noticed them, no one cheered them on, no one paid any attention to them. Not as they made their way to the Holy Temple, and not as they made their way back home. I don't know why the Kohen Gadol was treated with so much respect. I don't know why the Kohen Gadol was treated the way we treat royalty today, and I'm a Kohen. And I don't know why the workmen who cleansed and painted and repaired the Holy of Holies were ignored. But perhaps there's one thing we all know. The same thing has happened in our own time. I'm thinking of those people who are cleaning our cities day and night so that you and I can go out every day with less fear of contracting the disease. I'm thinking of those people who clean the operating rooms between every surgery so that it is safe to use the room again. I'm thinking of those who scrub the other rooms in the hospital so that those who work there and those who come to visit their loved ones might be safe. I'm thinking of those nurses who work in the nursing homes, who move from one room to another and who run the risk of becoming contaminated by COVID-19 every time they do, and yet show up every day to care for others, as we've seen in our own beloved 7 Acres. And I'm thinking of all the other people who help keep our country going during this pandemic, whom no one notices, no one praises, and too often, no one pays attention. These are the unsung heroes of our day and age. Without them, our hospitals and our streets, Beth Yeshurun, would be completely unsafe. Without them, the death toll in our cities would be even higher. And yet no one knows their names, no one gives them enough praise, and no one lines the streets to cheer them on as they make their way home from their jobs. If there's anything we can learn from this horrific ordeal that we've all been struggling with and unfortunately will continue to struggle with in different ways. I believe that it is our obligation not only to honor the scientists and the doctors, but also our responsibility to honor the manual laborers, the people whom no one seems to pay any attention to, for they too play a vital and indispensable role in getting us through this ordeal. After Shabbat, you can proudly express your appreciation by downloading, printing, and displaying this "Thank You to the Helper" sign in the window of your home, business, or vehicle. You can get it on the website tidelandshealth.org. On the website, you can find numerous ways to make a difference for all those who are helping us right now. From the first responders to grocery store employees to healthcare workers and delivery drivers, anyone working to keep us safe, healthy, and informed and as close to our normal lives as possible. As a beloved television personality, Mr. Rogers, famously said, "When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, 'Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping.'" My friends, Shavuot is about God's encounter with Moses and our people on Mount Sinai. Why was this small, undersized Mount Sinai chosen for this all-important historical and world-changing moment? The rabbis tell us, just as Sinai was the smallest of mountains, but the words spoken there changed the world, so the people of Israel, among the smallest of the nations, present a vision of social justice that has the power to change the world. As my friend Rabbi Ilana Greenblatt reminded me, this idea of something small having an unexpectedly prominent role is echoed in a verse from Psalms. Even ma'asu habonim hayita lerosh pinah. The stone that the builder rejected has become the chief cornerstone. The pandemic has made all of us rethink what is essential in our own lives. Now, maybe we have also realized who is essential. There are so many people out there who have risked their lives to sustain all of us. And yes, I'm praying every night for medical researchers to quickly find a vaccine. But I also need to start praying for the multitudes of workmen and women who risk their lives every day for you and me. In this time, the Psalm's prediction has come true. The neglected stone has become the cornerstone. More than ever before, the ignored people of our world have become its foundation. I hope this newfound respect and admiration will stay with us after this pandemic is over. In our own lives, let us take this lesson to heart. And let us take it a step further now in these moments of Yizkor. And remember all of those, big and small, immediate family members and other relatives, friends, neighbors, and even strangers who may have had an impact on our lives.